Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for inviting me and having me.
Now, not a lot of folks know this, but you don't do a lot of these. You don't do a lot of podcasts. You don't do a lot of the speaker. I really appreciate it. And one of the things is I think you have so many interesting facts that will come off as advice to entrepreneurs and folks that are building. I love that you've had so many lives at the company. You've been an open source company, and then you've been a product company, and then a workflow, and then AI, and then an AI native company. Mm-hmm. So you've covered a lot in the 6-7 years that you've been building n8n. And so I thought it'd be really interesting for the audience to learn a little bit about that, and then some of the advice that you have along the way. But maybe we start with your background. What is n8n? How do you describe it? And how did things get started?
Sure. First, my background. Maybe first Jan, and the founder. My background, I come actually from the visual effects space, means I was a compositor. For the people that don't know what it means, it's like I was the person that kind of combined the computer-generated 3D images with the filmed images that had like blue screen, green screen, and combined them and made them look good. And honestly, after a while, I got bored. Then I wanted to be something more technical again, and then I became a pipeline TD and actually helped to make the life of these people more efficient and easier. And that was quite sad because these people were always reliant on me, and I wanted to kind of empower them and thought they're the best people who can actually do it themselves because they actually know how it should be solved. And that is how the idea about n8n appeared. And sorry, the second piece of your question was?
Yeah, no, so you got started, you're non-technical, you went back into a more technical field, you're working in visual effects, tons of workflows that you were seeing. How did you build the first product, or what was the first product for n8n?
In the end, for me, it was like pretty much solving my own problem. Like I had, for example, also a previous startup where we did like web scraping. And one problem I had is like partly also kind of making it easy to get kind of this API-based information into Google Sheet, which seemed like a problem that people had like a million times before, especially if you want to do it at scale, like want to do something more around that. The same for some other problems I had, also honestly privately and at a company as well. So I wanted just to create something that kind of solved my own problem. I think that's always a good starting point, just being your own best customer and kind of really get started there, and then piece by piece, like bring it to this kind of next level. And I think it worked out luckily quite well.
One of the things you all did early on, and you continue to do extremely well, is invest in your community. Always top 50 projects in GitHub. You all have empowered over 1 million workflows now that are powered by n8n. Maybe talk us through early days, how you kickstarted the community. And this is one of those things where it has to be organic. It has to be, something that's done in a thoughtful way. How did you guys get started, and how have you guys continued to build that?
Sure. Actually, we're number 33 right now. So
amazing. Sorry, I'm way off. As your investor, I should promote you better.
Okay, yeah. Actually, probably in a few weeks, you're going to be top 30 finally, so that's nice.
I love
it. That was definitely quite important for me. Like, the idea about n8n was always to kind of really build this kind of default tool to make sure as many people as possible build with n8n. And it was clear, like, you only do that if you kind of give away the product for free, you provide a lot of help, you provide amazing experience, you kind of ensure that the people, like, again, get empowered back to the founding story, but at least they get a lot of value out of the product. And you can only ensure that plus being free when you are kind of something like open source. Again, we have a slightly different license, that's why we don't call ourselves open source, but it was the idea to really make sure it becomes as widely accessible as possible. And that is why, from the very beginning, I really focused on the community, meaning, like, I knew the product was very imperfect when I launched. Actually, a lot of rough edges, to be honest. And the only way how you can still make sure that people are happy is if you actually kind of make sure they have the best experience possible when they run into one of those issues. The nice thing is even, like, people know that there's always going to be some problems. But if they run into those problems and you don't help them, like, they leave. But if you actually help them, they actually go away with a more positive feeling than when they didn't have a problem, because they just know, like, something's going to go wrong at some point. They had the experience, they know we helped them, we empowered them, and we kind of unblocked them. And I think that was quite important. That's why one of the first people I actually hired at n8n was a deaf person, just to focus on community forum, writing amazing docs, having like the first community hangouts and all of this kind of community focus. And I think that is what people also just felt is like that the community was very important for us from the very beginning. And I think that's the only way how I also can make it work. Like I think a lot of people talk about community, but actually don't live it. And obviously people feel that. Like you have to think, I always believed you have to kind of give a lot in the beginning, because in the end you actually get so much more back in the long term. It's like amazing. Like we give away this amazing product, but like what we got back is like a lot of people that love the product, the people that love the community, that help each other out in the community, they kind of fix bugs, that they help with the docs, that there's so much we're getting back. Like that's amazing. And that's why I think it's an amazing approach. Like not always thinking about like how can I make as much money as fast as possible, rather thinking how can I really kind of create this kind of initially small community that I know can grow because they just love it and make them bigger, and just make also the pie bigger in the end opportunity, and then kind of monetize from the right people. You don't want to monetize the small people. You want to make sure big enterprise organizations get a lot of value out of it, and then you can monetize that. And you don't want to start there with the community, because I think that's the wrong thing. It just destroys the whole opportunity in the end.
You guys have gotten to the point now where you have those enterprises that are building on n8n. You're able to, have large enterprise contracts. What were some of the things that you did in the early days? There's a lot of founders in the audience that are trying to build the community, get that love. I've always heard from you is, you build for the product. You want to make sure that they're getting a ton of value out of it. Are there other things that you either did on the product side or the community side that in the early days really helped you to get more of the viral loops and more of the folks that were just so emphatic about what you guys were building?
I think probably a few things. Like one, I tried from the very beginning to build it up quite efficiently. Like I didn't really like this kind of whole sync style of communication.
Yeah.
So like I didn't start a Slack community or Discord. We had a forum, because I knew like this, people have a problem. I answered the question once, maybe 3 times, because they all ask slightly differently. But at least like it don't have to answer literally 50 times.
Yeah.
And I think that allowed us to scale it and allowed people to unblock themselves very fast. That's probably one piece. Apart from that, is like really empowering this very early community members. Like one of the earliest community members was Ricardo. He was like a developer actually based in the US. He discovered n8n, I think, when we launched on Product Hunt, and he just after a few weeks he kind of created his own first integration for n8n. Then I reviewed it, made some changes, gave him some feedback, and a few days later he created the next one. And in the end, he created like 56 integrations, just for fun, because he enjoyed it, because he really believed in the product. And that is kind of, obviously we hired him at some point, and he's still like, it was a very, very long time, and he's still, by today, the only engineer we have in the US for that reason. But I think creating really this kind of very early fans and getting especially this kind of community members that really believe in the product, in the organization. And we have done it again and again and again. Like Ricardo was the first one. John, some people will know him from the forum. We hired him. Bart, who's taking care of our community. Like so many people started that way. And I think if you kind of hire people that really believe very strongly in what you're doing, like you build a very different community. And that was something I cared very deeply about from the very beginning. And I think I shared it with some people already before. Like one of the first people I actually had to let go. I didn't have to let that person go because the performance wasn't great. I actually let him go because he was actually at this, he wasn't as excited as other people in the organization. Like people literally talk about, hey, like I can do this with it, and let's do this. Like they're all kind of built on top of each other. And he was sitting there, like he was a great guy, but this excitement was missing. And obviously, like that, you cannot really have a feedback conversation. Just be more excited. Like that simply doesn't work. So in the end, I had to let him go. But I think that kind of sets the right tone, just kind of making clear like how important it was. And in every hiring decision, we think like, is this person like really a great fit? Are they going to help us to make people in the organization more excited? And because it also translates to the community as well.
Yep.
And I think that is probably one of the pieces that has been working very well, especially also that people really feel like, I hear it so often that people say, hey Jan, I never worked in an organization where people cared that much. Like that's just amazing. Like you want to have that because they built an amazing product. They love what they're doing. Like I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Amazing. Well, you all have done an incredible job in the community, and it definitely shows with the feedback and what we hear there. Fast forward, a couple years after you all launched, you had your visual workflow builder, you had the integrations, you had the community, and then you had the foresight or the intuition at the time to embed AI into the product. So whether it was with OpenAI or Anthropic, allowing those nodes to come in to trigger a lot of the events that happened. Walk us through how you got started. You had the data, you had the product. There's a lot of founders that have businesses, have customers, and they're thinking about how do I now integrate AI into my product? How did you all do it? What were the things that worked? What were the things that didn't work along the way?
Sure. First, how it happened. First, the initial situation was we were generally growing quite nice. We were happy with the growth. But obviously, ChatGPT came out, and at some point, it was clear things are changing, and AI is here to stay. And we also realized, we were honestly not sure anymore, how this future is going to look like. We were always very confident about the future, and suddenly we were unsure, are we still going to be required in a few years down the line or not? And we obviously want to make sure, we are actually relevant in a few years as well. And originally, what we did is hey, let's just make sure we kind of use AI in our product and help people to become more successful. After a while, we realized that's literally what everybody's doing, and it kind of really doesn't make this kind of meaningful difference. We kind of also realized that if we probably don't change something, other competitors are going to come in and they kind of eat our lunch, especially if we don't become kind of part of this kind of value chain, we're probably going to be totally gone. We really realize there's some kind of big change needed. And then we thought about how can we make sure that we don't just use AI, we actually become part of this value chain, that people build AI-powered applications with n8n. And that is then when I also realized that actually sometimes also honestly partly luck as well, that actually kind of this AI piece did fit into very well into n8n, because what LLMs need is they have to connect to something, they need data, then they do something, and that has to go somewhere. All the stuff we already did before, there was just this one piece missing that we thought we could add rather fast. In the end, we did it, I think, between decision that we wanted to do something to actually releasing it, I think it was 6-7 weeks.
Amazing.
Also the last thing is it wasn't a big team. It was literally myself and 1.5 other engineers, a very small team. It was not this big thing where we literally kind of got all of our engineers to just work on it. We said, hey, we can make a lot of progress with a very small team, experiment very fast, learn very fast, because more people are not normally faster. Actually, smaller teams are actually much more helpful there.
Did you have to abandon any of the existing customers or use cases? That's one of the hard things, is you look at the incumbents and they have millions or tens or hundreds of millions of revenue, and then to abandon that and move to an AI-first product is hard and difficult and scary. Did you guys have to make those trade-offs? You went from a tiger team where you could move quickly, but now once you had the product, how did you make that happen and support both?
In the end, we didn't really have to give up on specific customers. What we have to give up on is specific features we thought are going to be important for us.
Yeah.
Because suddenly we had less people, and suddenly we had this other team built up that couldn't have this impact on other parts of the organization anymore, for example, monetization.
Yep.
But again, it was clear for us, it's probably better to have a little bit less revenues and kind of really kind of making sure we become part of this AI revolution. And that's why it was totally fine. But because it was rather an addition, rather than we had to take something out of the product, didn't mean we didn't have to abandon anybody, and people can still do the same things as they were able before. Yeah.
Got it. So you all have the community, move really quickly. You have a product that folks love. Now, you've exploded in growth, but it's also put you in competition or contact with some of the larger folks, whether that's Google and Gemini, whether that's OpenAI and AgentKit. You've now moved into areas because they've seen how interesting it is. How have you all either changed how you work with those folks, how you all think about scaling and launching additional products now that your competition set has changed quite a bit?
In the end, very often companies that seem like competition are actually not as close as you think, and there's not that problematic. Very often, for example, with AI, OpenAI launching the agent builder is literally it's an agent builder that's focused on building agents, but and it goes much broader. It's you can definitely like it's not a direct competitor to us. There's like some overlap, but actually have overlap with literally everybody. Like if you talk about Microsoft, like Microsoft is probably competing with literally any kind of digital company out there, have like any kind of product, but we still partner with them as well because they also realize like people have different preferences, or like actually this product works better there. So I'm normally a big fan of just collaborating with organizations because like it's changing over time. They go in one direction, we go in another direction. It could become closer, but very often actually you just realize they're not as competing as you thought initially.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add is, as we've seen why you all have continued to be able to scale even with those others, there isn't as much overlap. You all do a lot more of the complex use cases, but you also have your community. And those folks are so in love with the product, and they're going to continue to recommend it, use it personally when they're building, bring it into their work. And you all haven't shied away from that. You've raised larger amounts of money, you've gotten larger in scale in terms of revenues, but you've always focused on that community and making sure that they feel that love. So they're not abandoning you to just go to the next product or the next thing they see.
I think the nice thing is like a community you don't build overnight. Like you also don't build it in a year. Like what you really need is consistency. Like people have to believe in what you're saying, that you not just say one thing today and something else tomorrow. And that is why like a lot of organizations, I think they build interesting products, but at the same time, like if a totally new competitor appears, I think a lot of them obviously look at what we are doing. They, for example, then copy partly what we are doing, but what they cannot copy is either the community, but also like they maybe can see what we currently have, but they don't know the thinking behind it, and they also don't know like what is upcoming. So it's like I feel quite well protected, but honestly, the thing that makes n8n the most special is the community, because again, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, and I think it's resources well spent, and I don't think that many companies put as many resources in the community as we do. I think it's probably not very well known, but in the end, I think right now 70% of our developers were actually on the free version, in the end, only 30% on the monetization. Like we invest very, very heavily into that because we know like, again, everything we put in the main product, we make it better for everybody. We make the pie bigger, we make sure we get more used, we are more protected against competition, but everything we put in enterprise, like it's still very important. We especially want to unblock these big enterprise organizations. But if you kind of move heavily in the enterprise space, you're going to be kind of stuck in there. But if you want to become the default, like we want to be, we have to win both markets. That's why, again, this kind of community focus is going to be very important for us very long term.
And you guys have always been really thoughtful about the next pieces and the next things you want to launch. And so embedding AI into the product, and then I've been really impressed. Lately, you launched your AI, prompt or text to workflow. And so to be able to change even the interface for how you start to build workflows and build, AI automation. Now you've gone the next step, so you have an AI native product that's within the platform now, built on all the infrastructure that you all have built over the last couple of years. Walk us through, how did you go to make that decision that comes now with new pricing, new cost structures, new ways to sell the product to do that next evolution? What were some of the things that you all thought through when doing that?
In the end, it was similar to the original one. Like we just know, like the world is moving on. Like interfaces are changing. People price differently. Like first, maybe talking about the pricing. The most important thing was for us there is like adoption. Like our main focus at n8n is adoption. Revenue is secondary. And actually, I actually talked it when we fundraised with you. I said like the company, like that what matters for us. It doesn't matter for me if we have 10 or 20 million less ARR end of this year. What matters is like we capture the market. And I think that is the right approach. And that's why we also changed our pricing, because we had a problem with the old pricing was that the adoption and the kind of more the growth within organizations was hard because the pricing point was based on each active workflow, means it didn't scale as fast as the pricing point per unit was quite high. That's why we kind of want to break it something to something smaller, where you can just buy millions of them, and they can literally give everybody in the organization access, and you kind of automate more in the end. And you spread it more, you kind of provide more value. Sorry, the second piece of the question was around?
Yeah, just around how you guys were thinking about some of the things that went into making this big change.
And again, that was about just realizing that world changed. Like vibe coding is there to stay. Like I don't think what's going to happen is that you just tell an AI to build something. It writes a lot of code for you, or you kind of run something in a black box, and then you're happy with that. Okay, maybe not totally true. I think it works if you have like personal use cases, But I think like for the kind of use cases our users have, which they run some very important things on it. We have like big enterprise organizations. We have even governments like Ministry of Defense, which kind of rely on n8n. They want to be 100% sure that it runs correctly. And you can either be sure by exporting code, which is obviously very verbose. You have no idea what's happening there, or you have like an abstraction layer like n8n. And it means like that I think we have to find a way to make sure the users get to that as smooth as possible. And I think this kind of vibe coding approach makes a lot of sense. Like you can much easier get from this kind of initial idea to this kind of finished product. That's why we just realized, hey, we also have to kind of make sure we empower our people, our users to get to this later success later on, because the world is just moving there. And we can obviously try to ignore it, but honestly, it just means like something like, again, on Kodak in the end, like you don't want to kind of ignore the trends because you think, hey, I made more money, or it doesn't fit our paradigm perfectly. I think you always have to be open to kind of reinvent yourself partly when the world is moving on.
You all have done an incredible job of that, continuing to push on the product, continuing to stay in front. What is next? Where do you want to go? Very long-term focus in terms of customers, in terms of the business. Now, there's a lot that's happening in Silicon Valley and California in terms of AI and a lot of the large language models that you all work with, you embed with, you build on top of. They're there. What's your view on building in Europe? How much time should you spend in the US? Do you need to hire folks there to know what you need to build back into the product? Walk us through and how you think about that.
I think it's definitely helpful, like spending time there. There's obviously like the most meaningful AI companies, as I said, is still built there. I think there's still some work you have to be doing in Europe to actually get to a similar scale. So you definitely should spend time there. The good thing is like you don't always have to, in the end you want to talk with the smartest people. Like it's quite easy these days to just set up a Zoom call or something like that, so you don't always have to be there. But what I definitely also realize when I'm over in San Francisco, like every time this happens, oh, here's like this amazing dinner with this big 5 CEOs from this big organization, or there's like the CPO of here, or the person that invented X, and this happens like almost every evening. In Berlin, there's nothing. It's quite sad. It's like, I don't know how too many events I go in Berlin, but there's like some nice ones, but that doesn't happen very often. Yeah. Like especially not this kind of organizations they have over there where you can learn that much. There's also actually David, VP of Product, and we actually going to fly, I think on the 19th of January or something around there, to the US to kind of spend time with these organizations. And I think that's important because you want to kind of sometimes be in the room. It's still different energy. I think people share differently. You can learn more. So I think you should be going over there. But I don't think you have to go there like you have to live there, or you have to go there over every month. I think it's like there's probably no one size fits all. Maybe it's also different early on than later on. Also depends on your team and I guess how well plugged in you generally are. But I think normally if you go there like once or 6 months, I think for most companies it should be fine if you also again have all the conversations in between as well with these great people. And if you have access to them, I think that's probably more the problem a lot of companies have, especially in the earlier stages. That in later stages it's quite easy to talk with literally almost everybody. In the early stages, you have less access there, and that's obviously then harder for companies in Europe because they don't have the contacts like the people in the US have, because normally all of them have like some amazing angel somewhere that can just create a connection there.
And you all have done a great job of staying on top of these trends. You know, as you and I have chatted, I've always been impressed that you and David, VP of Product, sit down once a week. You're always talking about what's next in AI, what does that mean for us at n8n? You know, David's going out to the Bay Area, you've gone out to the Bay Area quite a bit. What are other things that you do and the company does to stay on top of the trends and thinking about where the market is going and to make sure that n8n can continue to be an integral part of that value chain?
It's a combination of like honestly just staying plugged in by reading what's happening online and then sharing those things. Like we have internal Slack channels where people just share stuff. People then share what they kind of normally like what the kind of learnings, what they thought it would be applicable for us, should be something you should be aware of. In the end, it's just a lot of conversations and just I guess natural interest. Honestly, like that's actually very often the problem we are facing right now. Like if you're kind of too deep into your day-to-day and like everything is too stressful, you don't take the time to take a step back, that when it becomes problematic and something, honestly, we also partly still could get better with, because again, day-to-day is quite stressful. And again, we try to take this time every week, and I think it's very helpful, but probably more time would not be wrong, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Jan. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and just being so open with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you all.